The so-called and misnamed Inflation Reduction Act created many structural flaws regarding energy, resulting in impracticalities and confusion on how to implement expressions of interest or EOI fees. A few months ago, Ms. Kathleen Sagama from the Western Energy Alliance spoke to some of these impracticalities. In her testimony, she stated that companies were paying for services that they were not receiving. She also pointed out the fact that this administration's policies have confused the market in many other ways. We've seen this administration force an unnatural transition away from reliable and affordable fuels by taking actions such as canceling pipeline projects, increasing burdensome regulations, and refusing to issue leases. On top of that, they've attempted to disrupt the multiple use framework outlined in FLPMA and the Multiple Use Sustained Yield Act, and initiated restrictive resource management plans that hurt local economies. The last thing that we need from this administration is another excuse to avoid the issuance of leases. According to Ms. Sagama's testimony, quote, the BLM is playing games with how it counts EOIs and acreage offered, end quote, suggesting that they intend to avoid meeting both the letter and spirit of IRA provisions intended to prevent the Department of Interior from completely crowding out reliable energy resources. If the EOI fee language were to remain unchanged, companies would be required to pay a fee of $5 per acre for the acreage they choose to express interest in, even if that acreage is never offered or sold. Essentially, the BLM is positioning themselves to charge for nothing based on the fact that they don't always offer submitted acreage. My bill, H.R. 7375, also known as the Expression of Interest Sensibility Act, resolves this problem by saying that the BLM may not collect a fee for EOIs until the corresponding acreage is offered at a lease sale. My bill also addresses the problem of parcels being offered at an auction that don't receive any bids. Whether sold or not, my bill requires the EOI fee to be paid for simply being offered at an auction. This would allow BLM to cover its lease sale processing costs, and it would eliminate any incentive for a company to express interest in lands that they don't intend to bid on. My bill will successfully prevent the scenario of operators having to pay to submit the same acreage, while also incentivizing the BLM to actually offer acreage included in submitted EOIs. It is imperative that we implement a new strategy to ensure that acreage that has interest is offered. I think we can all agree that it's wrong to pay for services not provided. Again, that's what's happening under the IRA for oil and gas expression of interest fees. Companies pay this $5 per acre every 3 years to express interest in an oil and gas lease, and as we all know, it's been the policy of this administration to avoid holding adequate lease sales. I urge my colleagues to support the Expression of Interest Sensibility Act to ensure that leases are being offered and to ensure that producers are getting what they pay for. Thank you, and with that, I yield back. The Mineral Leasing Act states that lease sales shall be held at least quarterly and more frequently if the Secretary determines that sales are necessary. In response to the Biden administration's failure to follow the law, the IRA requires the BLM to offer at least 50% of the acreage for which expressions of interest have been submitted for lease every year for the next decade, as a prerequisite for approving permits for wind power and solar power development on federal lands. However, the BLM is currently attempting to circumvent this mandate by counting BLM offered acreage rather than acreage submitted by the operators. Expressions of interest fees, operators submit an EOI to the BLM to nominate acreage for lease in an onshore lease sale. The submission of an EOI does not guarantee that the nominated acreage will be offered in a lease sale. EOIs were previously submitted free of cost, but the IRA instituted a $5 per acre fee for every EOI submitted to BLM. During the week of Thanksgiving 2022, the BLM announced 7 new instruction memoranda related to oil and gas leasing on federal lands. The BLM's new policy directed BLM employees to close all EOIs that have remained pending for 3 or more years. Our bill fixes these various issues and ensures fairness by directing the BLM to charge the EOI fee to the winning bidder at the conclusion of the lease sale. In that case, the EOI acreage is submitted and not bid on during a lease sale. The person or entity that first submitted the acreage would be required to pay the fee. The bill would also ensure that EOIs remain active for a period of at least 5 years. This legislation allows fees to be processed at the same existing rate of $5 per acre as long as the acreage being processed actually has the opportunity to get bid on at a lease sale. If no lease sales are happening or the acreage isn't offered, then no processing is occurring. This bill simply ensures that the BLM doesn't get paid when they refuse to process EOIs, which is what these entities are paying for in the first place. Once again, the only reason my colleagues would oppose this legislation is because they are okay with the federal government absorbing fees for services that they don't provide. They are okay with the BLM and other land management agencies getting paid to not do their jobs as the law requires, which is to assess these fees for the purpose of processing EOIs. With that, I yield back.